my band Omnigon has a new split 7-inch. It's with a band called Protagonist from Florida. The vinyl's two-color, a vibrant lime green and aqua blue. 4 labels teamed up to put out this split. Sell the Heart Records, which is Andy from Tsunami Bomb's label, Lava Socks Records, Alex from Sarcasm's label, No Time Records, Tommy from Corrupt Vision's label, and Disconnect, an awesome label from the UK. Every label has their own color cover, red, yellow, purple, black and white, and the red one's already sold out. So go do me a solid, pick up a copy, you'll get a digital download of an extra track that didn't make it onto the vinyl. Go visit Lava Socks or No Time Records if you're in the States, Disconnect if you're in the UK, and pick up some other music while you're there. You won't be sorry. Do something nice for yourself. You definitely deserve it. Okay, that's enough of me talking. Let's start the show.
In 1991, John Darnielle started playing acoustic songs under the moniker The Mountain Goats. In the early years, he played with different musicians, sometimes solo, making interesting, lo-fi recordings that developed a loyal cult fan base. Nearly a decade later, the Mountain Goats opted for a more traditional band approach and higher quality recordings, and their status in the indie world slowly rose as more people learned that John is one of our greatest living songwriters. He communicates emotional truths with clever wordplay and hyper-specific scenes, using his songs to create visceral stories with characters that you can visualize in your mind and that you often feel like you know on some level. He also takes an interest in sometimes offbeat topics like pro wrestling, early 80s goth, and yes, ska, when the San Francisco ska band Sad Snack turned the Mountain Goats' classic song No Children into ska. John got so hyped on it, he invited them to be their secret opener at their recent San Francisco show. And we brought him on this show and found out that he has a lot to say about ska.
What was your introduction to the Mountain Goats?
I think that the first time I remember hearing about them, and then I heard the boombox stuff. I didn't really connect with it, but then someone showed me Tallahassee, and I fell in love with that record.
Yeah, I had been put onto it by Jamie from Shoo Shoo when we lived together. They gave me one of the CDs that was the boombox stuff, and it didn't resonate with me at the time. But since then, the stuff that's recorded a little bit nicer, I've definitely enjoyed it.
And I do like that old boombox stuff now that I've been familiar enough with his songwriting style. But it just took a little bit of working through Tallahassee and some of the records that came out then to kind of get it. But since then, I really, really like pretty much most of his records, that he's put out. Or I should say they, because Mountain Goats are a band,
right?
In which we talk about a little bit. But Mountain Goats, I feel like in the last couple of years they've put out 4 records.
Wow,
yeah, they're still a very prolific band and good quality. Sometimes they'll pick themes and make sort of concept albums, however you want to look at it, and pull it off really well.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really excited to talk to him. I would have been excited to talk to him about Mountain Goats, but the fact that we got to talk to him about ska was even better.
Mountain Goats and ska. Maybe the next album will be, a themed album about a, struggling ska band.
Yeah, won't be ska music, but it'll be about a ska band.
It'll be about a ska band.
That seems like what would be in the wheelhouse for Mountain Goats to do.
Definitely.
All right, go.
So for listeners who weren't here for the first, I just got home from tour and I don't remember, I don't know who I'm talking to. They call out, who are you? Right? Because I just got in last night. But while I was making dinner tonight for the kids, I needed some music, and it's been a very, very intense re-entry from tour to home life. And I was like, you know what I want to hear? What was the song I wanted to hear? I wanted to hear One Step Beyond, right?
Nice.
But I wound up on the Apple Music Ska Essentials, right? Now, if you listen to heavy metal and you go to the Metal Essentials, you're probably going to start, bickering. Okay, well, those are fine, but there's a lot of other stuff that's very essential that's not on your list. But I thought this was actually a very good playlist. It had Prince Buster in there. Mm-hmm. It had a bunch of really, really good stuff. It was perfect dinner listening. It was perfect. It was obviously all first wave. It was all not the ska revival that I would imagine you spend more time on.
Yes.
We embrace all of it, but yeah.
We love the early stuff too, of course.
Oh, good. It's so. I mean, one thing I love about it is that that's all just people recording live in a room. None of those guys had multi tracks. Like
Oh, yeah.
that started all in real time. But we know this, that like the greatest musicians in the world are reggae musicians and country and western musicians from the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Right? That's like that's the cream.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear a serious jump forward in fidelity from like once they get into the 70s, into the more roots reggae era. So
Yeah.
the ska, rock steady, and the early reggae stuff is like,
And the Mento, right?
yeah. Well, the Mento is even older. We're talking 50s, and
Yeah, that stuff. It sounds very much like one person has the machine, and he's going to hit record on that. But yeah, it's so interesting because Jamaica becomes the place where like the entirety of dance culture radiates out of dub remixes, right? It's like all the stuff Hubby and Lee Scratch Perry and Scientist and all those guys were doing has such global implications. I think about it all the time.
Yeah, hip hop, electronic music, remixes. It all kind of stems from that.
Yeah, just really, I mean, the way that we think about recording stuff, the way that engineers think about their jobs, it's like dictated by these guys going, let's make some records for these local dances.
Lee Scratch Perry is, I mean, people say he's a genius, but he doesn't get the credit for the extent of a genius that he is and his impact.
You can't even measure it. He's every time he's sort of like Tolstoy or whoever, that every time you go back to your Lee Scratch Perry records, you go, wow, this is like even better than I thought it was. Like, and every time you go back to the roast fish and cornbread or whatever, you go, whoa, there's stuff in here I had never noticed before. Maybe I wasn't old enough for it or whatever. It's like every time you go back to, and his Marley productions, his he did what's the Chase the Devil, Max Romeo, right?
Yeah.
He did a lot of Max Romeo stuff, and that stuff gets deeper every time you listen to it. Yeah, he was an absolute genius. I was lucky to see him once here in Durham before he died.
Oh, nice.
How was that show? Like, what do you remember from it?
It was amazing. He had these pickup bands. Well, I mean, he was like an old man who, lived very much in his own world. But he was incredible. I mean, he's like, because the thing is, as you might imagine, he was smoking just a gigantic spliff the entire time. That's not allowed. This is like, it's not legal here in North Carolina. And the vibe you get is like, he sort of carries his own shield of unbustability. It's like, who's going to say to the 79-year-old guy wearing the disco balls around his neck that you can't smoke weed in here? So, he was incredible. His band was great. And the songs did that thing a lot of his stuff does, where in the first minute or so you might go, oh, well, there's nothing really special. It's just a groove, And as the groove deepens, I think there's a lot of George Clinton stuff that's like this, As the groove deepens, you go, oh, I was selling this groove short. There's really something in there. And he just sort of leads the band, in the live setting, because he's not actually doing any knob twiddling or anything, but he's really guiding the energy in a pretty remarkable way.
Have you ever heard of the New York reggae? They have a little bit of rock steady and ska, but it's mostly like a reggae band from New York in like the late 70s, called Terrorists.
I don't know them. No.
Lee Perry happened to catch them, and he anointed them as like the next thing, and he like worked with them for a while. Roland Alfonso worked with them for a while.
Oh, wow.
It's they do some really good grooves, but it's like kind of almost like really good grooves, but with like David Byrne singing.
The thing is, there's a lot of good music that came out of white people noticing that reggae was amazing in the late 70s. I mean, for a lot of weird combos. I mean, Adrian Sherwood obviously goes a bunch of really cool places with it, and Prince Farai, I feel like his last band, the Sons of Arca, I feel like that was a European white reggae band. I'm not 100% sure, but that Prince Farai is like my favorite of them all. So
obviously you like Jamaican ska, the old stuff. What's your favorite? Do you have a favorite, or does it just change?
I mean, Prince Buster, every time I delve it, I must say, reggae is something I know a lot about. Jamaican ska is something I know a little about, right? I'm trying to think. I mean, the Heptones, I feel like, start in the ska realm. But by the time they're making the records that to me are some of the greatest records ever made, they are not a ska band, right? The Leaders of Black Country. The Mighty Diamonds, I feel like, also started as ska. I mean, the thing is, a lot of the vocal combos, I think, started as ska acts, and as ska sort of phased out in favor of what we now would call roots, everybody just moved along, right? Prince Buster, though, he made a fair bit of ska, and his stuff is incredible. He's really like the energy on those records is amazing. I mean, the other thing is like, so that's Jamaican ska, but the Selector stuff, a lot of the English ska from the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s, those are incredible records. I mean, if pressed, my favorite ska act of all time would probably be early Specials, because the Specials, and those are Ghost Town. I mean, Ghost Town's a reggae record, not a ska record, but I would argue that the Specials are essentially a ska band, and they are absolutely one of the most amazing bands of all time to my taste.
Yeah. What the Specials did and the Selector, I like all the two-tone acts, but those two acts in particular were the mission of finding a middle ground between ska and punk rock.
Yeah,
I feel like those bands pulled it off. Like,
well, and being vocal, covering songs like "Message to You, Rudy," right? Being really vocal about racism in the scene in a time when nobody wanted to hear it. It was like there was a small group of people willing to step out largely in English circles, English post-punk or punk era circles, to go, hey, this is a value worth standing up for, right? And those guys were almost all on the ska side of the fence. The punks didn't talk a lot about it at that time in the UK or in the US, really. The punks talked about injustice and so forth, and you can argue that this lumped in injustice, but it was guys like the Specials going, no, this specifically is the problem, and living their values by making sure they were presenting, a large band that looked more like the population of London. Pretty important, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it was really bad at that time with the rise of National Front and the message of kicking immigrants out of the country.
When police violence, it's something that was none of the other punks addressed it. Linton Kwesi Johnson obviously addresses it in some of the greatest records ever made, right?
Brilliant.
And and his dubs are the most amazing. But I think the ska bands of London were like in the way they lived, and also, but like there was a famous button that ska kids wore at my high school that said "Fuck art, let's dance," right? And that's the beautiful thing about the ska bands, is they make sure to be conveying their message in a way that it might get picked up, right? Because that's important, right? If you are perceived as a tiresome blowhard, then you can't sell your message to anybody, right? And then your message is worthless, no matter how righteous it is, right? It doesn't matter. It's like you can go to your grave with your righteousness. But the Specials, if you lock into what they're doing, you are unlikely to emerge from that without your politics having been radicalized a tiny bit, right? And that's really the most you can expect. And so yeah, that stuff is pretty special to me. It's pretty special, I say.
When and where did you go to high school? Speaking of,
I went to Claremont High School. So this is the thing is, and I will say, I did nothing but clown on ska for 4 years, right? Even as I was going to ska shows, I would be there skanking away and then making fun of them between songs. Because it was like, because the thing is like, there was so much Anglophilia tied up in it. And I do not engage Anglophilia. I don't think it's good, And Anglophilia in California, in the post-punk scene, punk scene, was endemic, right? It was just like, every Golden Voice flyer would say "from England" to sell tickets, because that's how you could get people to show up, right? And I had a big attitude problem about that. I was like, you know what? We have a lot of good bands who are from here, and we don't need to be pretending that like somehow England is better than us. I had a lot of West Coast bitterness about this. But at my high school, you're young, I assume, right?
We both graduated high school, and I graduated in '93, and Adam like a couple years younger than me.
Yeah, 95.
Only a little younger than me, but but still, it will probably shock you to know that at my high school, if you showed up, and this is not a ska band, but it's ska adjacent enough that it'll give you pause. The day after it was announced that the Jam had broken up, you could see a lot of black armbands at my high school.
Wow.
Wearing parkas with black armbands whose lives were absolutely turned upside down. The Jam has broken up. Now, I don't guess there's another high school in the U.S. where this was true, but there were a lot of his high school had 900 some people, and ska was a big part of it. There was a guy named Elko who was from Holland who had been up on all that stuff and wore a parka with a Selector patch, and like ska kids were a real thing at my high school in 81, 82, 83. And we were tuned into it, and we argued about the value of that music. I was in the artsy crowd, sort of straddling the artsy junkie crowd, right? And so we didn't really understand ska. We didn't get it. But at the same time, like I say, you'd go to the theater cast parties or the dances, and those would be the songs that would put you on the floor. You couldn't deny it, right?
Yeah.
But yes, so that's the environment. Is like I became aware of it probably in '81. I had a record. It was a double album that had a bunch of live cuts on it. It had like a band called Skafish. You know them?
Skafish, that doesn't ring a bell.
And it had some live Peter Gabriel and some Toya Wilcox and a bunch of stuff. And all that stuff was kind of, everybody was fairly ska curious at the time. You know, it was, I think, and the thing is, if you take all the scene questions out of it, what's interesting about ska is that it brings cut time to the table, right? It says, how can we, let's do things in a way that steps, right? And it really privileges musicians playing together, right? Which sounds so simple that people don't stop to think about it, right? But ska bands are sort of legendary for, you got to have your horn section. Everybody's in. Everybody's syncopated with the bass and the guitar, which is playing only on the upswing, right? And all this stuff from a musical standpoint is really interesting because it means that you have these musicians who have to be able to stop on a dime who've chosen to make this kind of music, right? And if you are a musician, that sort of stuff then makes you think the same way that when you're younger, you tend to be dismissive of country and western, right? And then at some point, right, you listen to a Merle Haggard record and the guy takes the solo and you go, oh my God, that guy's as good as Glenn Tipton. That's an incredible guitarist. You know, he's playing Okie from Muskogee or whatever, but this is great music, you know, and the same is true in a lot of these ska bands. It's like, these are the badasses, right? And I think that's one of the interesting things about it.
Yeah, if you're in a band that has a horn section and you're playing something that's a groove meant to dance to, you have to be a good musician, otherwise it just doesn't work. Yeah,
no, you have to bring a lot. Like, it's no accident the ska band that played with us earlier in the tour in San Francisco. You know, these are band kids. These are people who are in their high school band deciding to play ska, and that's because they're musicians and they notice that something interesting about it. Ska is also kind of inherently funny, right? It's like, you know, because it's kind of goofy, and especially once it gets to England, you know, then there's a goofiness that those guys bring that I think is valuable. You know, when I was in high school, I wanted serious music, so I was like, these guys are just playing around, right? But again, like, that's where Ghost Town comes along and says, "What are your values? This is one of the greatest records ever made," you know. And so, but yeah.
What ska bands did you see while you were in high school? Were any of them local or regional?
No, they were local. You wouldn't have heard of them. There was a band called the Tickets. So the Tickets. I was at the show where the Tickets at midnight became the Targets. Do you know the Targets?
No, I don't know the Targets.
Love that name change though.
There's a band called Undercover, and they performed with their lead singer's name, which I can't remember. It was like, you know, James Moore's Undercover or something. Right? That was an LA band who played at a very tiny club that my stepfather took me into. It was like there was not a lot of people there. It was one of those clubs that Billy Vera and the Beaters used to play at. Those guys played like 7 nights a week, right? Do you know Billy Vera?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So the way the Beaters made their rep is like they just literally played 6 or 7 nights a week forever, right? They were the house band everywhere. And so I went to, God, Undercover was the name of the act, but it was some guy's name with a possessive apostrophe after it, like James Moore's Undercover, right? But they had a song called "Skanking in the Trailer Park" that I remember very well.
Nice.
It was a good tune. I don't think I saw anybody who you would know. You know.
So you didn't see like Untouchables or any like?
Oh, I did see the Untouchables at least once. Possibly, I think the Untouchables were actually on that Target's tickets bill, but I was there to see the Targets because it was in Pomona. But the Untouchables, they were everywhere. And what was the big tune that they "Free Yourself," right?
"Free Yourself," which is kind of more of a Northern Soul type.
I was going to say it's a Northern Soul tune, right? Yeah. But that's the thing. If you guys could be teleported to Pomona College in 1982, you would be stunned by the prevalence of ska. I had a friend who did the Vesper rally to Newhall, right? It was like there was a whole, it was quadrophenia out there for a couple of years.
That's wild. I looked it up really quick. "Skanking in the Trailer Park" is by Billy Sheets and the Undercovermen.
Billy Sheets, Undercover, right? That's who I saw. So well done. Wow. feeling my circuits go. Yes, you had the Undercover part. Well done, old man.
Yeah, it's funny. There was a band in Santa Cruz. I think they started in the mid to late 80s. They were called Undercover, then SKA, like period K, period A, period. So
I wonder if it was Billy Sheets. That's the thing is, like, Santa Cruz is not far from Southern California, and a lot of SoCal wind up there, and it wouldn't surprise me if they traveled. Billy Sheets like was around. He was like, that was somebody whose name was on several bills, and they were tight. They were really good. They had another song called Wow. This is like, so it's said that, it's good for your brain. Like I have a thing against nostalgia. Like I don't really listen to much music from when I was young, but I've read articles recently that suggest that it's good to engage that stuff because there's circuits in your brain that stay healthy and active if you do keep waking them up and go, remember this song from when you were 12. Remember this song. It's apparently very good for your brain, right? So when you look up Billy Sheets, I go, oh yeah, he had another song called Real Estate. Right? And the chorus was real estate, jack it up, jack it up, jack it up.
So yeah, you mentioned Sad Snack that opened for you.
Oh, dude, these guys were so great.
We got to tell everybody the full story of Ska No Children, because this is an epic journey that leads to them on stage.
Yeah.
So first, I know, okay, they post this video and they tag you and you see it. Is that how it starts for you?
I feel like they asked permission first.
Oh, did they?
Which is quite amazing that kids do. Is like, you don't have, as far as I know, you don't actually have to have any permission to cover a song. You just have to pay the mechanical when somebody asks you, right?
Yeah.
That's not my end at all. Is the thing. Is like, It's not asking the guy because he's on Twitter a lot. All I can do is connect with legal people. I don't know. It's fine with me, whatever, But that's what I always tell people is like, you can do whatever you like, and you have my blessing. And I cannot speak to any legal consequences of it because that's not my area, right? And it's never going to be my area. I got my plate full, but I can direct you to the people to talk to if you want to. But they are lawyers, right? So it's like, and the thing is, if you're a young band, you're like, well, I don't want to talk to a lawyer. I want to ask the guy who wrote it. But I'm not, especially when you're me. If you're like the sort of the figurehead of a band, there's this notion that you exert a much higher level of control than you actually do over everything that goes on in your world, right?
Right.
I have control over the lyrics and over the music and over what I do. Everything else is kind of out of my hands. It's like, although the thing is, I do exert more control than most people in my chair do, right? Like I shoot down a lot of cover art ideas. I get asked to do, short videos. Like, well, no, I don't want to. I'm not going to do special stuff for TikTok or whatever. I have sort of, I have a sort of a eclectic set of standards about what I will and won't do, but I am not actually the one guy in the top chair. It's a collective sort of, and so there's a bunch of people with a bunch of jobs. But they asked me, and I said, look, I'm not in a position to clear this for you, but I can tell you nobody's going to come after you about it, because I won't allow that to happen. I can say, if my manager notices, hey, these guys cover your song. Yeah, no, it's fine. Don't bother them, right? But ASCAP, I can't stop ASCAP from bothering somebody, right? If ASCAP comes, that's out of my hands. And so, but I doubt that will happen. ASCAP does other stuff. So I was excited about it, precisely because I think, well, for one thing, I'm sure you are familiar with the Propagandhi song about ska.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I loved Propagandhi in the 90s, and I didn't hate that song yet, Propagandhi no longer stands by that song either because Chris has grown as a person. But there was a time of real factionalism, and when it really did seem like a lot of ska bands would reach for that brass ring, want to get that major label contract, right? And everybody who was in the scene that was against major labels was like, you guys are about money, and this, and we can track this exactly to No Doubt, right? But I'm 100% certain that Chris Hanna would say, no, look, I didn't really know anything about ska. That was just where I stood as a young punk,
I actually, if I want to interject, that song's really complicated because when he wrote that song in like the late 80s, it was actually written to annoy the Nazi skinheads that were like coming to their shows in their hometown in Canada. It was like, it was a fuck you, you're not welcome here song.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And then they released it like in '93 on Fat Records on their first or whatever record that was.
Well, I think it was like on, wasn't it on was it on How to Clean Everything, or was it?
Yeah, it was on How to Clean Everything. Ska was not a mainstream genre at that point, so it wouldn't have made sense that it was like a commentary on ska. But when ska did become like a thing.
Yeah, then it becomes the commentary.
Then it's like people sort of like took that song, and I think that's why Chris and them kind of backed off. It's like it's not really what we were talking about, and I understand it's like hard to give the whole full story.
I would guess that when they made that song, they hadn't stopped to think about what ska had meant in London in 1980.
Sure.
Those are questions that you have to be a little grown up to think about. You have to go, oh, okay, well, if a multiracial crew of dudes, is making a record and they choose to make a ska record in London in 80, what's that mean? Just to make the record, regardless of the content of the record, if they chose to make it in this style, what does that say? And I think really part of the punk assumption, which I think is worth interrogating, is that the only thing you're really listening to is the lyrics and the music, right? But context is hugely important, right? Who's making it? Where are they making it? When are they making it? What are the circumstances around when they're making it? These are all massively important questions that inform how we take a piece of music, right? And so, like I say, when you listen to Selector and to Specials, and you consider the scene that they're making that in and who their audience is likely to be, right? Then that has to inform your listening to these records. But if you're younger and you haven't really had the time to be asked these questions, it won't inform your listening. You'll just hear the record and you'll hear, what do you mean stop your messing around? What kind of first line is that? Like, well, it's actually a cover, and it's about violence in the scene, which affects everybody, that's the thing, is like, as with a lot of things, your first immature look at it is going to be reactionary, and punk is inherently reactionary. I think, punk.
It is. I think so. Yeah.
Grows into not being reactionary, and when it's good, Propaganda becomes a band who is by no means reactionary, right? They're actually a very complex band, but they begin life as punks, right? They begin life saying, "Here's the stuff I see in my world that sucks," and so it makes perfect sense that would be a response to a local event, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I would literally sweep the ground in front of them where they walk. And say,
when you shared the Sad Snacks cover of No Children, you had a long post, all hands on deck.
Yes.
It was very nice post.
It was so, I don't remember the post is the thing. I don't keep track of my posts. My post takes place in real time. So, so I usually don't remember what I said. But I was excited, because the thing is, like, ska, where it sort of sits culturally now in the small slice of people who think about it at all, right? Yeah. Like, it's funny, right? There's something inherently funny about ska, in part because of the ska revival of the 90s, which, 90% of everybody hated, but the 10% that didn't hate it was a much broader section of the American public, and those bands made money, right? And then over time, stuff that at the time in the 90s, if you were into like indie rock or whatever, and you would hear Goldfinger or whatever, and you go, oh my God, I'm not trying to hear this. But then you play Tony Hawk a few years later, you go, I'm kind of digging this Goldfinger tune. I can't help myself. It's good. It's really good. You may or may not know I've covered that song on piano. And so
I have heard. This is a 2016.
Yeah, because it's the thing. So when I first heard it on Tony Hawk, I was like, oh my God, what is this, ska revival stuff? Are you kidding, right? And then you hear it 40,000 times when you're trying to beat your own high score, and you go, I'm actually kind of moved by these lyrics, and that's one of the things about ska. I don't know the genre thoroughly enough to say that it's universal, but there is an earnestness to ska, right? Like, it's one of those musics where it's almost hard on sleeve. The lyrics are almost always something kind of obvious, but that warrants being said anyway. Something like a guy in the Goldfinger tune, just talking about how it's weird and confusing to be 21. How you have so much stuff you want to do, you don't know where to start. It's incredibly moving. And your first response to that, if you're a cynical 29-year-old, oh yeah, whatever, you're thinking about your deal. It's like, I don't dismiss that either. We all have to go through our cynical period, but you grow a little and you go, wow, what a brave thing to say in front of the entire world, that you're so confused about what to do. It's like, that's an amazing thing to say in a song, really. And a lot of ska is like that. A lot of ska is people saying generally to other rude boys, stop your messing around. You need to think of your future. It's time you straightened up. You'll end up in jail. Well, that's really, it's a parental thing to say. It's like a dad thing to say. But here are these young guys in Jamaica going, hey, stop your messing around, man. You go to jail. You don't want to go to jail. Jail sucks. what an amazing thing to do with music. It's like, and as you grow, that's what you do. You think, well, my cynical stuff has its uses, it's fun, but that's the real thing. That's the sort of thing that that somebody might hear at some point and might pause to think about, and that's where music is miraculous. If it hits one person at the right time and delivers a message of hope, that's literally a miracle. It's like, because that's the message that they're not getting from elsewhere.
Yeah, there's actually several of those songs from that 60s Jamaican period that have the message of chill out because of the circumstance of violence and stuff happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. As guns begin to show up in Jamaica, the impact that the arrival of firearms in Jamaica has on the scene, it's something that we can't really imagine. We can talk about it, but you have to read pretty deep in it to go like, no, once people start bringing pistols to dances, it's a bad scene, right? Because these dances, they're not like, they are in local boroughs within Kingston, and if somebody shows up with a gun and is drunk or whatever and offs three people, that could be a serious loss to the scene. That could be a loss to the future of the music that they're constructing, to the culture that's being built at that time. So I think a lot of musicians at that time were very aware in Jamaica of like how grave an issue it was for firearms to have become a thing in Jamaica.
Yeah, and the sound systems too. You know the sound system part of the culture, right?
Oh yeah.
They were competitive in an almost gangster way.
Did you see when Tubby's sound system went up on eBay about 10 or 12 years ago?
No.
Oh my God, I wanted to buy it so bad.
How much did it end up going for?
I don't remember. It's something north of $10,000, but not what it was worth, because that's priceless history. It's like it was Tubby's sound system. It was literally the one he used at dances, of which there is there's almost no documentation of those dances, right? Like we know when they happened, but we don't know what was played, and we don't have recordings of them for the most part. I think there's one or two out there, maybe more than that, a handful. But I mean, like those were, and this is something that's also true with jungle and rave and hardcore and a lot of stuff, is like what was really happening is something that is completely undocumented. It's like the records were part of it, a big part of it, but the sequence they were played in and the audience they were played for, what was going on that week in that neighborhood, these are like, that was a big part of what was going on, what was shaping the music going forward, and so and that stuff is largely undocumented.
So you reach out to Satsnack and you say, okay, we're coming to San Francisco in a few days.
It was like we did it really late because I didn't think of it until I was on tour, and it came up on Twitter or something. I went, hey, did everybody see the Ska No Children? And I get pretty manic once I start touring, and I forget who. It could have been me, but I don't want to claim credit if it wasn't me. I forget who said we should invite him to the show. It might have been. I don't know. I said they were in San Jose.
I think they're San Francisco.
Yeah, they're San Francisco.
But yeah, so we hit them up, and they were super stoked. And yeah, it was like we didn't really. Then I handed everything. I talked about having people. I was like, Brandon, my tour manager, coordinate this thing for these people. They're going to play the opening number. I could see the look on Brandon's face, like, my hands are full, and I work 2 jobs with you guys already. For me, but I have lead singer disease, which means that I can't really perceive in real time what's going on with other people.
At least you're aware of it. That's the first step, right?
Yeah.
But no, the thing is, I'm an author, so I can really accurately describe it later afterwards. So, but yeah, no, I knew. I was like, I'm making extra work for Brandon, but I thought it would be pretty special, and in fact, it was a highlight of the tour.
So there's footage of it, but what doesn't show in the footage is that the lights go down. People are expecting you guys to go on. One Step Beyond plays over the speakers.
That was our choice. That was we were like, we were talking about entrance music. Oh, we should make our entrance music something ska, and I was like, it has to be One Step Beyond because I consider that one of the best.
Sure.
And the Madness track. I mean, the original is great, is immensely great also, but that Madness track, like, that locks into a moment for me.
Oh, and as far as like it being like a DJ track for people ready to dance.
Oh yeah, if you want to set off a dance floor, that's the song to put on.
Unparalleled. Yeah, no, that's seriously, people run from their smoke break to get on the floor for that.
Okay, so then Satsnack has a banner that lowers.
Yes. I was backstage, right? But we knew they had called Brandon about it. They have a banner. So let's let them have the banner. That'll be awesome. And so yeah, the banner lowered over we have a backdrop of the cover art from Dark in here. It doesn't say the Mountain Goats on it, but it's cover art. And so the banner lowered. It says Sad Snack. Right? And you could feel the confusion of the room. Like you could feel it filtering to the backstage area.
And so they're on stage. They go into Ska No Children.
Yes.
And then midway through the song, you guys get on stage and you just join them and start dancing.
Yes. I said, well, excuse me. I start what?
Skanking.
Skanking. Thank you so much. I did the proper skank. I did the classical skank with my right elbow up and my left elbow back, and reverse and reverse and reverse. But the thing that was funniest about it, so my coat that night is I have two identical coats. One of them's purple and one of them's green. They're Hugo Boss coats, but they don't look super flashy or anything. But the green one, obviously, like that's parka color, right? That's part of the attire. If you're not wearing black and white, you can also wear army green, right? And the other thing is, and this was a total accident. It wasn't a total accident. I had thought about it. Oh no, I take it back. It was intentional for their set. I have a pair that I just got before this tour. I've never had them before in my life, but I got a pair of prescription sunglasses. Right, I need corrective lenses to see well. So I had a pair of prescription sunglasses for when I go to the beach or if I go running on a sunny day or whatever, so that I can see clearly and be shielded from the sun. And I was like, oh, I should wear my shades up there, and then I can be full on in skank mode in sunglasses, right? So I did, right, and it was hilarious, and the photographs show. But then we were so excited after they were done; it was so amazing. Right. And then our set started immediately. We didn't leave the stage. They left the stage. We said, thank you. They left the stage. And I forgot that I was wearing sunglasses.
Wait, for how long?
Like the next 9 songs. Like I totally didn't realize. And I was like, suddenly at one point I went, oh my God, I'm still wearing my shades. So then what was confusing about that is like, I don't like to look at pictures of myself, but then a picture comes up on Twitter. I was like, you look pretty cool in my shades. I should do that more.
Yeah, this is a new thing.
I did it for one more show just because of that. Yeah.
So then your set starts with non-ska No Children.
Yes, that's right. We thought that was here's the thing. There's 2 songs that the Mountain Goats are kind of obligated to play somewhere in the set, whether it's in the encore or the body of the set. Gotta play No Children, gotta play This Year. Right. It's like it would be unsporting not to. Those are the songs. There are people who are buying an expensive ticket specifically to see those songs, right? So I don't hold with bands who say that, that they don't have to play their biggest ones. If we had 10 giant radio hits, then I would say, look, we can't do all the hits. We got to do other stuff. But if you have 2 that are significantly, like we have a third one, Up the Wolves is also very popular. Well, of those 3, I'm comfortable leaving 1 out, right? But it's probably not going to be No Children This Year. I think those 2 are big. Those are big numbers for us. We usually do all 3 of them between encores in the set because I believe strongly in, I am an employee of the people who have come to see us play. And, like I shape the set in a way that I hope is pleasing to them, but I also want to make sure, I shape it pleasing them, but also pleases me. But by the end of the night, I want them to say, I got what I wanted, So I was like, where are we going to do No Children in that set? We should just do it right away. We should just
so good.
Yeah, that's the best move.
Yeah, well, because the other move would have been to do it last. That's kind of the more artistic move, is like open and close with the same song. Shriekback did that on several tours. It's I think that's more pleasing to the band than it is to the audience, right? With the audience, it was just great to do No Children twice.
I know Josh from Sad Snack, and he told me that before the show that you were like, you came in and you visited them in the back room, and then you consulted with him on how you should skank during the set.
Yes.
So what were your skanking options that you were pondering?
Well, you can have a mild skank, like a skank in place, or you can skank across the floor. You can fully, you think about, your scene making rude boy just completely skanking is like running.
Sure.
Right. It's like you can cover a lot of ground. And so, I just wanted to make sure what I didn't want to do was completely upstage them, because the people in the room are there to see the Mountain Goats. And I know that. And a lot of people conflate the Mountain Goats with me. I'm the focal point. I'm the guy who writes the songs. And I'm, and I have a fair amount of charisma that I have to sort of admit to. So but the thing is, like, a guy like me can eat up all the oxygen, right? And I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to take the attention away from the people who are brave enough, who've never played a room that size at all, to go ahead and say yes, to be bold enough to say, yeah, let's do this, because that takes courage. It's I think a lot of people in this sort of clout intensive moment would think, what do you mean courage? It's like they get a lot from it. Man, it is really nerve wracking to step onto a big stage if you've never been on one. It's really something, and especially if you're, as musical as they are, like those guys are not, they're not chasing clout. They're not trying to establish themselves as personalities. They're trying to establish themselves as musicians, and that means that their focus is on their playing, not on whether they pop on stage or whatever. And a guy like me, like I say, could come in and sort of just dominate the moment. And I didn't want to do that, so I wanted to talk to them about that.
Did they get a sound check?
I don't remember.
They did. Josh told me they did. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
But I feel like they had a lot of trouble with traffic getting to the venue. So I think abbreviated sound check, but they did.
Did you know that that was like their second show ever as Satsnack?
Dude, I was just talking about that. But the thing is, they're in good company, because wasn't like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young at Woodstock? Isn't that like their first show?
So, yeah.
Well, now they're all rich. So Satsnack can be half as rich as CSNY.
There we go.
So I read that so in regards to No Children, I read that the seed of the song started when you were driving and you heard "I Hope You Dance."
Yes.
And you, out of hatred of the song, you started singing I hope you die.
Well, not just out of hatred of the song, but I was writing the Tallahassee album at that time.
Yeah.
Right. Which is an album, and I was living in this couple's brain. It's an album about a divorcing couple, or a couple who's on the cusp of divorce, I used to say. And so, like, these people were with me when I woke up and with me when I went to bed. I was trying so hard to write an album that would be good. I wanted it to really do justice to this story arc that I've been working on for 4 or 5 years, or 6. And so there was like whatever I heard I would fold into that context in some way or another. And I hated that song so bad. when it came on, it's like when I got that idea, as the chorus came out, as soon as I said, "Oh, that would be funny for your dudes, right? Your couple can totally can say that to each other. That would be funny." So I wrote most of the lyrics on the plane and in the hotel I landed at for that. I think it was the Athens. I can never remember if it was Athens or Tallahassee I was flying to. I think it was Athens that I was flying to the Pabst Blue Ribbon Ball, which was a 2-day show put on by a publicity company whose name escapes me, but it could have been to Tallahassee. I'm not sure.
What's funny is I remember that song, but I haven't heard it in a long time. So I was listening to it today just to refresh my memory. And my wife comes in my room and she's like, "What the hell are you listening to?" What's this crap?
Yes. However, are you a parent?
No.
Here's the thing, man. All that stuff that you think is so damn corny, right? Go ahead and have you some kids, then see how you feel about it, right? It's like, it will soften you, right? It will, like, when I hear that song now, I still think it's like shameful to pander that hard, but I also get it that, like, the songwriter could say, "Do you know how many people have told me that song made them feel hopeful? That song gave them a way of thinking about what they hope for their child," right? I can't argue with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair,
Well, that's the thing. Like I was talking about earlier, is like your youthful cynicism. If you're, I'm willing to say this as a generality, and I try and avoid generalities, but your youthful cynicism should give way to a softer and more forgiving heart.
Yeah.
Where you look at any form of art, right, and your question is, how does this minister to somebody, to its intended audience or the audience that finds it, instead of how can I say this sucks? And the thing is, we learned this from the way people were dismissive of ska, including me, right? It's like, and then later you go, "Oh wow, I wasn't thinking about the musicianship. I wasn't thinking about the context. I didn't care about having fun, but other people who do care about having fun, nothing wrong with that." But when I was a young gothy type, to me, like if you put 1 nanoangstrom of value on having fun, I was like, "Oh, you're shallow," And I was a dick. And so, those people were right. You should enjoy your life. There's nothing wrong with enjoying. Skanking is fun. If you're having fun, you're living life well. And so yeah, that's my more mature feeling about that song. However, when I hear it, my toes still curl up. It's like, 'cause I do think, like, there's a good version of that song. It's "Forever Young" by Bob Dylan, right? and even the Rod Stewart version of that, which is sort of the very burnished version, it'll bring you to tears. It's amazing, and whereas I Hope You Dance is really, it does feel like people going, oh my God, we're going to make so much money on the greeting card angle.
So I want to ask, so Tallahassee, this record comes out in 2002.
Yes.
The intended single was See America Right, correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
No Children has since, after its release, it's been in movies, it's been covered, it blew up on TikTok, like I think it was a year and a half ago. There's a now famous ska version.
Yes.
When did No Children sort of become like the song that you absolutely have to play?
So it's funny. It's a long story. I'm going to carry the computer in the next room. You'll hear some children talking momentarily. So because I was such a tyrant about album sequencing in those days, like you could not tell me how to sequence my album, right? If you were the head of the label, I was going to argue with you. For the album after Tallahassee, I did let them make a correction. They told me, we will do what you want, but we think this is what's right. And I said, okay. But for Tallahassee, I think everybody's hopes at the label side were pretty low. And I got my way 100%. I said, this is the sequence of the record. This is the way it goes. I had sequenced it mainly narratively and in terms of flow. And the other thing is, I have always valued saving some of the best songs for the back half.
Yeah.
Right. Like to me, when I was a kid listening to albums, that ruled for me. If side 2 was better than side 1, man, that's a band I like.
And just to interject, I really like how you often close with the most, or one of the most emotionally potent songs, like the sort of the accumulation of the record, and then you get the last song.
Yeah.
It brings it all home.
Because to me, well, the thing is, like, when you do that, you're saying to the person who came with you for the whole journey, thanks. I'm glad you stuck it out. Here's something, that's better than everything you heard before. I believe really strongly in that. In the digital age, you're out of your mind if you still do that. And I still do that. I'm out of my mind. But everybody else will tell you, look at everybody's, if you go to any digital form that shows you the metrics, the first song has the most plays. Look before anything hits. Look at the first month of anything. First song has the most. Second one has the second most. By the fifth song, everything's gone over the cliff. Nobody's listening except for the hardcores, right? So the thing is, if you have a really good song and you want somebody to hear it, you need to put it up front, right? But you couldn't tell me that in 2002. There was no way. If you'd have told me to put No Children further up, I would have put it last. And so I think it's like 7 or 8. I'm not sure.
Yes.
But I know it's deep in, because I thought you needed to work to get to it. I thought like it should be this moment of real release. But the other thing is, I didn't think I would be able to. I wasn't a very good guitarist at that point, And No Children is a pretty demanding song. It's in 6/8. It takes a lot of energy, and to sing and play it at the same time, you have to be a better guitarist than I was then. So we didn't play it at all on the Tallahassee tour, not once. I don't think we played it live. I could be wrong. Peter might correct me. He might say, no, we tried it once or twice, and then you said we weren't going to do it. Peter remembers this stuff better than I do. But I do know that a couple tours later, we broke, I think. You know what? Will I have you? I'm going to find out when the earliest performance of No Children was, because I can do that now. But the thing that happened was, once we actually brought it in, it didn't really slam super hard right away. It's like people liked it. It didn't get a great deal of attention, but it sort of had its cult. It was played twice in 2002. That's hilarious. And it was played 6 times in 2004 and 2003, 8 times in 2005, right? Then 13 times in 2006. And this is like, we toured a lot in those days, but I can see that it really starts to get its legs under it around 2009, when it was played 32 times. So by that time, we're probably playing at most shows. But the thing is, it was funny. It was not a hit. It didn't get radio play. The people who liked it were, for the most part, people already in the fan base, though there were always occasionally, like I remember a show in Charleston, a married couple who was already very drunk coming up to me. We didn't have a dressing room. And so I was at the bar playing like video poker, and they came up and said, hey, we're the alpha couple. I did my thing. I said, well, then you should
Yeah,
get therapy.
it's not a great thing to be.
but No Children's our song. I was like, well, cool. It's glad to hear. I'm glad you enjoy it. But yeah, so it really very slowly, and this confirms a lot of my indie prejudices, right? It's like it found its audience by itself. I didn't push it. I wasn't playing at every show, making sure you hear my cool song. I find that humiliating. I sort of feel like, a song that is really good, right, will find its people. And actually, we have a song right now that is doing the same thing, which is Tidal Wave, which was one of my favorite ones from Getting Into Knives. And it has very slowly, like the audience has started to notice that we're doing something that's sort of a level up for us with it, the way that No Children was kind of a level up in terms of its being 6'8" and requiring a little more from me musically and being formally kind of interesting, and Tidal Wave has been taking on this sort of life of its own within the audience, which is really exciting for me.
So there's another song from the Tallahassee sessions I want to talk about. It's called Ethiopians.
Yes. Oh, it mentions Desmond Decker, right? Or
no, it doesn't mention. It just says Lovers Reggae.
Oh, right. No, I have a song that was never released that mentions Desmond Decker.
Let's get to that after this. Let's see. I think we play Lovers Reggae on accordion and banjo. That's the line.
Yeah. On accordion and banjo when the moon is high. Yeah.
And so you named the song after the group Ethiopians, right?
Yes, exactly. Very good. Nobody has ever noticed this. So
well, let's hear. Why is that?
Why has nobody ever noticed it?
No. Why? What's the story behind you going like this? I'm naming the song after the Ethiopians.
Oh, the thing is, like a lot of the song titles are sort of this capricious sort of semaphore in those days. It's like I'm going to say Lovers Reggae in it, and then I'm going to mention a band who's not a Lovers Reggae act, but everybody who likes Lovers Reggae knows who Ethiopians are, right? And Ethiopians is the Israelites, right? Isn't that right?
The Ethiopians are a different band. Desmond Decker's.
No. The song, the Israelites.
Oh, gotcha. No, that's Desmond Decker.
Yeah.
It's Desmond. Okay, I'm trying to think of what Ethiopian song was on my mind at that time, because I'm sure that's what it was. I was like looking for a good title. I don't call my songs usually by whatever's in the chorus, and so I was thinking of acts loosely from the Lovers Reggae window.
Yeah.
And Ethiopians was the first one that came to mind. I thought, that's a good title. So I was like, and also because it references Ethiopia, which is so central to the whole reggae moment, to the whole reggae ethos, and so it's just a sort of a, like I say, a sort of a points of connection semaphore kind of thing.
Would have been sick if you'd called it Train to Skaville.
Train to Skaville. You're like, oh, I can't wait to hear this song. And then it's like that song.
I think given that the song wasn't released, I could have called it whatever. Has the studio version of that, is that out there or no?
I heard your Day Trotter version. I haven't found the studio version.
Because there is a Tony Dugan recorded studio version. We did it at Dave Friedman's studio. What's it called? Tarbox up there in upstate New York. We recorded a version of it, but yeah, it has not seen daylight. Along with Alpha Chum Gatherer, the other. I think there's maybe even one more song of Tallahassee that didn't get released.
So you wrote a song that references Desmond Decker?
Yeah. What was that one called? It referenced him by his nickname. Can you tell me his nickname?
I don't know his nickname.
Yeah, I don't know that.
One Drop Derek. Do you know what that means?
Like the one drop, the drum beat.
Yeah, the drum beat.
Well, no, one drop, because that's how many takes it takes him to get something done.
Oh, okay.
Oh, nice.
In those days, they were tracking to acetate, right? It's like when you're doing a dub plate, you're doing it live, right? It's like you're going to play the track, the guy's going to sing, and I'm going to track you to the acetate live, and whatever you sing, that's what's going on there, right? Well, plenty of people are going to waste acetate with flubs, because then it's not digital. It's like you have to break that one. Derek was legendary for getting on the first time. He was called One Drop Derek. What was the line in the song is like, we played One Drop Derek on the kitchen stereo in the house on Ludlam Street. That's all I remember about it.
When did you write this song?
99, 98, 99.
Was it part of a session for an album, or was it just a standalone thing you wrote?
So in those days, there was no difference between a session for an album and a standalone, because I was just tracking by myself into a boombox. So so I didn't ever say, okay, and now I'm making an album. I just recorded what I recorded. And
so Tallahassee kind of began that sort of that way of thinking for you.
Yeah, with Tallahassee, I was always writing Tallahassee. That's right.
So I want to hear about a song that you wrote, never released, called Peepin and Skankin.
Where did you hear about this?
You tweeted
it. So let me see. Let me see if I can remember the lyrics of that one. Oh, I can totally remember because one of the lyrics has an extremely good reference in it. I was in a restaurant at an important meeting. They have glass tables you can see yourself eating. You got it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you got that reference?
That glass tables, that's mirror in the bathroom.
Thank you. So I was immensely proud of that. So how does it go from there? It was a reference to the fact that Peter kept taking pictures of people like it was taking pictures like, you know, of stuff without, you know, like he'd look out the window and snap a picture. He was taking tour pictures. And as you do on tour, you just start making fun of people for whatever they're doing. And so one of us, not me, started calling him Peeper, right? And then, so when he started peeping, that's where I came up with Peepin and Skanking, right? So I still have the tune. I wrote like 3 verses to it. I was in a restaurant in an important meeting. They have glass tables you can see yourself eating, right? And the chorus obviously goes peepin and skankin, right? So that's it. I literally wrote a horn line to it in my mind.
Can you remember the horn line?
Oh, and peepin da 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 peep. It echoed the vocal line. So like it's between peepin da 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 peepin and skankin, right? So
nice. So now you said that you chose to leave it unreleased because you didn't want to, because it's a joke song.
Well, yeah, this is the thing is like, so I'm telling you this story. There's going to be a guy, and when I say a guy, I mean 100% a guy. It is literally only dudes assigned male at birth who stayed that way, who do this, right? Who go, it would be funny to yell the joke song I heard about on Twitter, right? That is dudes, right? 100% dudes do that, and of course it sucks the air out of the room. There's no real response to like, no, I'm not going to play the song that doesn't actually exist. Thank you for asking. It's like there's nothing to really do about it. It's like it's a very, very frat kind of thing to do, and so but that's the thing is I learned this early on. If you write a funny song, you have to live with the funny song. People want to hear it. You know, they're going to yell for it, and if your set is trying to go in a more emotional direction or whatever, the funny song is not going to have any place in there, but people who came to hear it are still going to want to hear it. So I mean, that's why I jumped off the funny songs train pretty early because my early songs were all pretty funny. And I noticed that's what people wanted to hear. I was like, I don't want to be the guy with the funny songs. I don't think I have enough funny songs in me to be that guy.
Yeah, I understand that. There was another thing that you said. I think this was more Twitter stuff, but I think you talked about, you know, in response to people saying you should do ska, you should make a ska record or do a ska version of this or that.
Yeah.
That you're allergic to you know, a musician who's successful in this one area that says like, oh, I'm just going to go make a ska record or a metal record or a kids record.
So that's the thing I believe really strongly. You know, it's like, and I'm sure, as with everything I believe strongly, I'd be open to somebody saying, hey, here's a counterpoint to that, you know. And I have heard counterpoints to it regarding me in metal, right? Because I love heavy metal. It's my favorite form of music. And exactly for that reason, especially because metal bands could not get any respect for the longest time. Now they are culturally very current. NPR reviews metal bands, whatever, you know. But in the 80s, it was literally Chuck Eddy, right? That was the only mainstream critic who had a kind word for heavy metal. Nobody else cared, right? Chuck Eddy was like alone saying like, this is decent music. These people are making good and interesting music. Everybody else just disrespected them all day, right? But did these bands change their style? No. They said, we like this music, you know, and we're going to make this music for the people who like it. For me, who already has some presence and some clout and some guaranteed record sales, you know, it's like if I make a record, there's a certain number of people who are just going to buy it, period. They like the Mountain Goats, you know. For me to abuse that trust on that side and make a record that, in a genre they don't like or don't care about, maybe, and sort of like eat up some market share from people who have been toiling with it, I would only do that if I thought I could make a great metal record. I'm not going to make a metal record just to make the Mountain Goats metal. Oh, it's hilarious, right? I don't. That's kind of Jack Blacky. Love to Jack Black, respect to him. But I don't want to do that. If I was going to make a metal record, I would have to. This is what I said the other day. I have to go into the woodshed for about 10 years, right?
Yeah.
And then I'd practice my scales, like all the metal guys did when they were children, right? I would play scales and modes. I would learn some Van Halen solos. I would learn some Richie Blackmore solos. Right? I would learn some. I'd learn some Scorpions tunes, right? And then I'd graduate from that and move on to what's more modern. And then I would have something to say in that field, right? But I think when somebody like me goes, I'm cool enough to do whatever genre I like, I think that's disrespectful to the genre. It's like,
Yeah.
you can use pieces. I can hire a big band horn section or a ska horn section to come in and play on my record, right? Well, now that's musical communication. That's beautiful, But for me to presume that I get to do whatever I want, that doesn't sit right with me. I know most Americans think I get to do whatever I want is like, as close to a religious conviction as we collectively share. But I think it's bogus. It's like, I think you should, if you love a form of music or literature, you shouldn't slum. You should say, let me pay my dues here. Let me at least be as good as the baseline in this genre. And I'm not that in metal, right? I'm not that in metal at all. I'm not as good at,
Yeah.
I mean, I can do stuff. I'm better as a soloist. People have observed in this last tour. When I play guitar solo now, I'm better than I was a year ago, right? I'm getting somewhere. And I love that. But for me to go, I just think it would be kind of jokey, and I don't want to do that. So,
Where do you think like the line is between absorbing influences and sort of, putting them into your melting pot that's like your style, and being a culture vulture?
I mean, I don't think there's a firm line, and I think a lot of it depends on where you're coming from. It's like, but a lot of it also depends on how people who love the genre that you're borrowing from hear your stuff and how they respond, right? You can learn from that. If you bite a phrase or whatever from something, and somebody who knows what you're biting goes, oh, that's kind of cool, so you brought in that from there, then it's okay. And if it looks like you're sort of trying to wear a mask briefly to get attention, then they'll notice that. I don't think there's a hard line. I think you could, because like musically, it ought to be the case that you could deploy any sort of musical trope in whatever context you like for the betterment of what you're working on, right? But the reason that that's not unilaterally the case or universally the case is that there are other considerations. Like if when white acts started borrowing rap tropes, well, the rap acts had been working for tiny labels and not making a lot of money, like they were doing it for love of this genre they were building, and then for white acts to come in and go, oh, we're using your tools now. It's like, well, show some respect to the genre that you're engaging, and that's important. I think that's really important. But that's not true across all genres. I think when rock borrows country tropes, well, rock is the child of country anyway, so it's natural, So it depends. There's no hard fast rule. I mean, I think it does come down to how much do you actually like the music you're borrowing from? How much do you really know about it, right? For me, and I feel like a lot of postmodernists would disagree with me, you should have a good familiarity with the music you're borrowing from, right? You should be able to talk about the basics of it, and be able to have more than a passing familiarity. I don't think it's real hip to go to hear something you've never heard before. Go, oh, that sounds cool. Let me grab that. Yeah, go learn where it's coming from. You'll get more out of it, and you'll be showing more respect to the person you're borrowing from.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, there's cultures that music come from. There's scenes.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things that are, and they overlap, and they're separate circles, and they're important.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complex question. It varies so much from scene to scene. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that new age music informs a lot of music now, right? New age music, those guys had nothing but clowned back in the day. They were all on private labels. They were not making money, but they believed in what they were doing, and it had its own usage. Very limited. None of that stuff made money. But I think most of those guys were just happy to see that they were right. That there's actually uses for those sounds, and those moods. But it depends. It depends on where the stuff was coming from, or what its goals were in the first place. There's just so many questions involved in that larger question.
So you did this album in 2015 called Beat the Champ.
Yes.
Great record. One of my favorites. It's a wrestling theme record. By the way, I think if the hair match, the closing track on that record, probably one of your most emotionally potent songs.
Thank you. And the first song written for the record. Maybe Southwestern Territory was before. Maybe, I'm not sure. One of those two.
You go, okay, this is a wrestling record. There's a cartoon on the cover, but that song will bring you to tears.
Thank you.
It's fantastic. So there's a weird overlap between pro wrestling and ska, and I want to get your take on it.
I don't know anything about that.
We'll explain.
Okay. Well, so for one, okay, actually, your drummer John Worcester.
Yeah.
He there was a picture of a hat going around that said ska and pro wrestling are the only true forms of art.
Right.
Okay. He shared it. Like a lot of people shared it. It really, really resonated with a lot of people. A lot of people like, that's me. That's me. There's wrestlers like Sami Zayn.
Right.
Like,
I know Sammy actually.
He's embodied the ska. Who's that guy? The guy that
AJ Gray.
He's like on Twitter, like last few days being like, ska's the worst music ever. And like, he's kind of making, So I was just curious what you think of the ska wrestling, like Sammy, or if you had any theories about that, why these subcultures have like an overlap.
Oh, I mean, all subcultures overlap eventually, right? That's the thing. Like subcultures are all there's theory stuff about this. Like any subculture shares with any other subculture the fact that it is subcultural, right? It's like that's one thing that subcultures have in common, is that they are not the monoculture, right? They're not the mainstream.
Yeah.
So in that sense, like you may or may not know anything about, I don't know, like gore movies, right? But I guarantee you, there's a lot of stuff about the people who are into gore movies and you that is similar, right? The way that they keep track of information, the way that like the big ticket items within the genre are considered a little corny and entry level. And so like that stuff is common from subculture to subculture. They have similar vocabularies, or if not, I don't want to say vocabularies, but similar grammars. That there's a way that subcultures operate, right? Largely to preserve. There's a lot of gatekeeping in most subcultures, and there's a lot of discussion about whether that's valuable or not, right? I think we're now in a place where a lot of subcultural spaces are saying no, gatekeeping is bullshit, right? I think it's generally true, even as I feel resistance about that. Like I don't in metal, which is so precious to me, like the fact that I won't make a metal record doesn't mean some other indie schmo won't, and I think that guy shouldn't, that theoretical dude. It's like, I think you should show respect, and well, that's gatekeeping, right? That's, because actually, if you want to make any kind of music, there's no reason for you not to, you should express yourself, but that's one thing that subcultures share, is a concern with protecting their own boundaries for fear of being diluted, which means erased. When a subculture gets diluted, it changes, and then the thing that was so special to a certain number of people is forever altered, right? And these are things that subcultures tend to think about a lot, right? And so so the overlap is not just between wrestling and ska, but in all subcultures. Like when they encounter each other because one wrestler likes one band or whatever, that's when those similarities sort of come to light.
Yeah, and kind of also like you did this album, The Goths, like a couple years later. I feel like I'm not like I like a lot of those bands. Adam is probably more into them than I am.
Oh yeah, totally.
But I love that record a lot, and
thank you.
But yeah, I can relate. It's very similar. What you're talking about on Goths is stuff I can relate to, even though I wasn't a goth when I was in high school.
Yeah, I know. I thought about that when we were making that record. It's like, this stuff feels gothy to me, but it's actually just being in a smaller little circle.
Yeah. And I like how the record is kind of paying tribute to the bands that were important to you, the moments that were important to you that maybe the larger culture isn't aware of, will never be aware of, will never care about.
Yes, the world will never know nor understand the stuff.
Yes,
Blender.
Love that line.
The once and future goth band. We played that song on this tour. I was really happy to have it back. I'm fond of that song.
Yeah, I saw you guys at Fillmore when on the Goths tour.
Oh yeah,
Great, it was a great tour.
thank you.
The instrumentation of that record, I feel like, is a little step out of like kind of like your stuff. There's a few songs on there, and it was cool to see them live. There was a few that I felt like were really really powerful in the live setting.
The thing that because I called it Goths instead of like, what was the original title? I'm gonna look it up and see if I can find it. Let's see here. Yeah. So the original title of the album was Death Rock Fantasy, i.e., for Fender Rhodes and small band. Right. The concept was that every song would be written on a Fender Rhodes and played on one. Right. So that the Fender Rhodes is a keyboard that's made by Fenders, I think in the 60s, maybe early 70s, but it was pretty popular in jazz for a while, right? It's like it's a hammer driven keyboard, so it means the pressure on it matters how hard you strike the keys, right? But there's this built-in vibrato, right? It's sort of in between a vibraphone and a piano, and an electric piano, and so I wrote everything with that Fender Rhodes, and then we bought a suitcase Fender Rhodes to take on tour, which weighs a ton and often requires repair while you're touring. But yeah, so the instrumentation of the album was like the instrumentation was what guided the album. That's how the album becomes what it is because that instrument is guiding it.
Yeah. So in 2012, you did Transcendental Youth.
Yes.
And there's a fair amount of horns on there. And I was reading this interview you did with The Atlantic. And it's funny because Atlantic is like, oh, and we are esteemed journalists, And the interviewer is saying like, oh, there's horns on your record. That just makes me want to make ska jokes. And you're like, why ska? Why not jazz? Like,
I vaguely remember that. Like the thing is like, so I don't know if that was their music person, but the longer I make music, the more the more I notice that like everybody loves music. It's part of everybody's life, but people are so uncurious about it. People will say, "Oh, horns equals ska," and you go, "Are you not paying any attention to anything?" It's like it's so aggravating to me that like, and that sort of shorthand in the internet age is almost universal. It's like, "Oh, distortion pedal, it must be metal." Well, no, there's no in music. Nothing has a set meaning. It's all context. It's all how you deploy it, right? And that includes the keytar. People like to always go, "Oh, a keytar, this doesn't mean anything." It doesn't matter what the instrument is. No instrument has an inherent characteristic, right? A horn doesn't mean jazz. A horn doesn't mean ska. A horn doesn't mean classical, right? A horn is just a horn, right? And this, to most musicians, is self-evident, right? Even though the whole reason I'm the Mountain Goats is because I didn't want people to think it was a folk act, right? and a dude with an acoustic guitar playing under his own name is a folk act, right? But I was like, well, that's not fair because I'm doing what sounds more like punk rock to me, But I guarantee if I'm out there, John Darnielle with an acoustic guitar, oh, is folk rocker John Darnielle? Well, I don't want that, so I took a band name, But that's the thing is like for so many people, there are these sorts of associations that form that they choose to make primary, right? I think that's a very poor choice. I think like it really limits how music. It's a way of walling off music in a really unproductive, but not only unproductive, like self-denying phase. Like if for you horns means ska, I don't hate ska, but I feel sorry for you. It's like then you can't hear horns that are the horns in Bruckner's Equalis, right? That are the horns on a Van Morrison record, on like was it Stone to Me by Van Morrison, right? Incredible horn breakdown in the chorus there. If you hear that and you think ska, I feel sorry for you, right? Like then you are really incredibly, you have decided to take what basically is like a Twitter flex and make it your ethos. Well, good luck to you. It's sort of like saying a violin means I don't know, like Appalachian music. I don't dislike Appalachian music, but a violin doesn't mean anything inherently. It can be anything. It can be deployed in innumerable contexts. It's what you do with it, right?
Yeah, and it seems too. The other weird thing is like, I don't play horns. I play drums, but horns, I mean, I've always thought horns are pretty cool, like sounding. But people like so many people feel like horns are funny, and something about horns in music, whether it's ska or anything, it's like makes them laugh or want to make a joke about it.
This isn't a formed enough idea for me to say that I stand by it. But I'll say, as a guy who plays next to a sax player every night and hears it and notices the audience response, right, that I think there is something in the timbre of horns that is so immediate and demands an emotional response, so strongly that it puts you in such a vulnerable position that you're likely to laugh and want to make light of it rather than confront, like it can be really something for music to suddenly ask an emotional response of you. You know what I mean? It's like this Van Morrison song "Stoned Me." If you look into it, like when those horns come in, they deepen the lyric he's just delivered so profoundly. And it's two saxes, and they go da 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 da, right? And you can do two things there, right? You can go with it, in which case you might cry. You might feel very vulnerable, or you can laugh and say, "That's saxophone." That's saxophone, right? Like Kenny G, right? Right. It's like, and I think that's the way that people put up a barrier, because music really, music is the thing that could take you to some places you weren't actually planning to go, right? It's like, again, back to the specials, is like you'll be having fun listening to specials and go, oh, I hadn't thought about this problem between Black audience members and white audience members in London, and the specials will put you there. They go, oh, you were having fun. We actually have something serious to share with you also, and that's the miracle of music, is like, that you can do that. You can have up-tempo number that introduces some dark stuff. That's why when people say like, oh, your songs are like so sad, but they're in major key, I'm like, well, yeah, that's the fun of it. It's like,
Yeah.
you're bopping your head, and then you connect with something real, and then you get two things for the price of one, right? So, but I think some people do not want two things for the price of one. They want one, right? They want to laugh at the funny saxophone, right? So, but I think some of that is because there's something inherent in the timbre of the instrument that demands a response of some kind. And if you're not ready to just be naked and vulnerable, then you can laugh, and that's fine too. It doesn't really matter.
Thank you so much for listening to In Defense of Ska. If you've enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you normally stream or download episodes. If you haven't already, grab a copy of my book, In Defense of Ska, available at clashbooks.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. It's at In Defense of Ska. And please consider joining our Patreon at patreon.com/In Defense of Ska. You will get monthly bonus episodes, extended interviews and commentary per episode, and access to the In Defense of Ska Discord. In Defense of Ska would not be possible without the great team that tirelessly works on it every week. So you should go check out their other projects as well. Co-host Adam Davis has an amazing band called Omnigon. Give them a follow on Instagram and Twitter. It's simply at Omnigon. And our editor, Chris Reeves, has a phenomenal record label and podcast called Ska Punk International. For more information, go to skapunkinternational.com. And if you've ever enjoyed one of the highly specific In Defense of Ska memes floating around the interwebs, it was likely the work of The Bands I Like Only Charge $18. Find them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And on that note, we leave you by saying, Ska now more than ever.
Hey, this is Adam. The show's over, but you're still listening. That probably means that this show, you enjoy listening to it as much as we enjoy recording it. So if you want to help support, for only $5, you can join our Patreon. Right now, you'll get exclusive behind-the-scenes commentary for each episode. You'll get monthly bonus episodes of Aaron and I talking about topics that don't fit into the usual topics we discuss on the show. And you'll get access to our In Defense of Ska community Discord. Who knows? We'll probably add some other stuff down the road. And if you've already signed up for our Patreon, we thank you. Thanks so much. We hope you'll tune in again next week. Until then, ska now, more than ever.